is Doug DeMuro, and today I have some bad news to report. I have already crashed my Toyota Land Cruiser. You may remember back in January, just 3 months ago, I announced that I had bought a Toyota Land Cruiser, and I had always wanted to get a 200 series Land Cruiser, and I was excited and everyone was excited for me. Well, I've already crashed it. So today I am going to explain what happened, how I crashed my Land Cruiser, and I'm also going to give a few Land Cruiser first impressions. So let's get started. Before I get started, be sure to check out Cars and Bids, which is my enthusiast car auction website for cool cars from the modern era, now with free listings. You can list your cool car for free and auction it on Cars and Bids. And you should, because we've had some fantastic sales recently, including this Lamborghini Aventador, which brought $270,000, this fantastic E36 BMW M3 sedan, which sold for $25,000, and this wonderful E39 BMW M5, which brought over $30,000 in a beautiful color. We've done great with E39 M5s and with everything else. So if you're looking to buy or sell a cool enthusiast car from the modern era, check out carsandbids.com. Okay, so today I'm going to tell you about my Land Cruiser crash, but first a very quick refresher. I bought a 2013 Toyota Land Cruiser in order to live on the East Coast of the United States. I live on the West Coast, but I spend a lot of time on the East Coast, and so I bought this Land Cruiser that would sit out there and I could use it whenever I'm there, and I can leave it sitting for months at a time if I need to, but when I arrive, the Land Cruiser is there, trusty Toyota, ready to start up and do whatever is asked of it. That was the plan. So I needed something that was big because when I go there, I go with large groups for my whole family, and I wanted a lot of space, and I needed something that was good at off-roading because I do a lot of off-roading when I'm out there where the Land Cruiser lives, and I wanted something reliable that could sit for a long period of time between me being there, and so that was it. The Land Cruiser made sense. Big, reliable, capable, perfect car. So I got one. So I bought the Land Cruiser on December 13th in Kentucky. My best friend drove it from Kentucky to Massachusetts, where it's going to live. And literally on January 4, 3 weeks after I got it, I hit a deer. Now, I grew up in Colorado. People were hitting deer all the time. It was a pretty common thing. I lived in Georgia and in Pennsylvania, where deer strikes, again, are very, very common. They're not common at all out here in California where I live now, but I've lived around it all my life, people hitting deers, but I have never myself hit a deer with a car until now. My first deer strike comes 3 weeks after I got a new car, and you can see the damage right here. Now, most people who are used to driving in places with deer, especially at twilight, which is when this happened, it's when most deer strikes happen, they'll tell you that they're always on the lookout for deer. And I was too. I always am. You see deer ahead, you slow down. You see deer, even if they're just standing there, you slow down. Always. Every single time, because there's usually a few deer around, and because deer are unpredictable, and they can, even if they're way off the side of the road, they can dart in front of you. But people in deer country will always tell you the one deer you can't avoid is the guy who just darts out right in front of your car and doesn't give you any time to react. And that's exactly what happened here. I was driving along on a road that had sort of a forest directly next to it. There was no shoulder, there was no like mowed section that gives you a little bit of space between the road and the forest. It was just forest and road. I'm driving along, you know, going way slower than the speed limit because I'm worried about this exact thing, and all of a sudden, deer, bam, it was that fast. It was like no time to react at all. Deer hit. It was really just instantaneous, basically. You know, when you hit a deer, I love animals, and you feel bad, and so I get out, right, and the deer is there, and he's broke his leg. I mean, he's not gonna have long. I'm like watching this poor deer hobble off, and I feel terrible, you know. And then a lifted Jeep comes up behind me. So I walk up to the Jeep, and he's like, "Hey, did you hit a deer?" I said, "Yeah," you know, and then he goes, "Wait, are you Doug DeMuro?" I'm like, "Don't know. My parts of my car all over the ground. There's this bleeding deer. There's fur in my headlights." I'm like, this is not the time for one of these interactions. But anyway, so that was it's absurd. Absurd fan moment there. But anyway, so hit the deer, car is damaged, and That's the story of my Land Cruiser crash. But anyway, so the damage, you can see it here. It doesn't look like much. Looks like a bumper and a headlight, that's it. And indeed, it wasn't really that bad. I mean, I drove the car home, drove it around afterwards. Headlight even still worked, it was fine. But in a modern car, there's no such thing as not that bad. You see a bumper and a headlight and well, that headlight has an LED, has LED running lights in it. That headlight has a HID xenon bulb in it, levelers, that sort of thing. That bumper contains headlight washers, so there's a washer reservoir back there, and like a system that, pops up a thing and shoots water at the headlight. All that has to be replaced. The grille is damaged, so that includes your cruise control, your adaptive cruise control sensor, your pre-collision system, safety. So there's all this stuff. Even though it's just a bumper and a grille, it turns out to be pretty bad. And in fact, all told, the total damage to repair everything came to around $4,000 just to get everything fixed from a relatively light impact with a Deere. But I did get it fixed, and now the Land Cruiser is back to normal. And I gotta say, hats off to Hagerty, who insures my Land Cruiser. They insure like specialty vehicles that aren't your primary car, and obviously this one isn't. So they insured this. They got me a check for the repairs within a few days of the accident happening. All they wanted to see was pictures. They didn't have to send anybody out there. It was easy to do. And honestly, shout out to the body shop at Don Allen Ford on Nantucket Island in Massachusetts. My Land Cruiser is this sort of weird pearlescent white paint. They called it Blizzard Pearl, and I guess it's like a 3-stage white paint, and I was absolutely convinced the Ford dealership body shop would not be able to match this paint, but they did match it, and it looks perfect, and you really cannot tell that the car was in any form of accident at all. It looks like it was never hit. So hats off to the Don Allen Ford body shop crew. Now, a lot of people are going to watch this video and they're going to tell me to get a steel bumper. Lift it, get a steel bumper up front and back, make it tougher. Teach those deer a lesson. I want to make the point here that is not the goal of this vehicle for me. This is not my daily driver. It doesn't even live where I live, this car. So it's even not even a fun weekend toy. It doesn't even get up to that level of use. It's a car I don't want to put money into. I'm not going to modify it. I'm not going to lift it. I'm not going to do any of that stuff. It lives thousands of miles away from me. The goal is to make it last, to make it simple, and to not dump money into it. This car will ultimately rust being so close to the ocean where it is and kind of waste away, and I want to throw money at it as a result. So I get the urge to modify a Land Cruiser, but that's really not my goal with this car. It's never going to get washed. It's not going to get treated well. Sand all in the interior. I don't want to throw thousands of dollars in bumpers and lift kits and wheels into this car as a result. So I get the appeal of a modification. Frankly, if I have a couple more Deere strikes, I would consider a steel bumper, but that's not really my plan for the vehicle. But there you go. That is the story of my Land Cruiser crash, which was sad and unfortunate, but it's fixed now and I feel okay about the whole thing. I was pretty down when it happened, obviously. In fact, I went to the body shop and they said, all right, bring in your registration so we can get the VIN and pull the details. And I said, I don't even have a registration. The car still has paper plates. It's brand new. It's very sad. But anyway, so I want to move on now to some Land Cruiser impressions. So that accident happened in January, got it fixed in February, and I flew out to the East Coast in March, and I kind of drove the car a lot. I drove it in Massachusetts, but then I drove it from Massachusetts all the way down to Washington, D.C., and I got a lot of time. I think I've done like 2,000, 3,000 miles in it now. And I have some opinions on the Land Cruiser. First off, a couple things I really like about the Land Cruiser. One is its durability and reliability. My use case for this car is perfect for one of these, which is being away from it for months at a time and then arriving it and expecting it to start, operate perfectly, and carry 7 people and go off-roading with 7 people. No other vehicle, in my opinion, can reasonably do all that, and I think it's really perfect for that. I love having a vehicle I can trust, which is a big deal for me, a guy with 2 Land Rovers and 2 aging German cars, and also, this is pretty reliable, but still, it's just nice for once in my life not to think about my car. Will it work? It always works without putting up a fight. And that's something I find to be really special. The other thing I love about my Land Cruiser is I love how subtle it is. When I first bought it, I explained this was one of the reasons that I bought it. I love that it's a nice vehicle with a nice interior and nice capability and nice luxury features, and yet nobody would ever suspect it for being that. You're going somewhere, you have a Range Rover, you have a G-Wagon, even an Escalade. It invites opinions about you. It tells a story about you that I don't really want to be telling. It projects a certain image, basically. But The Land Cruiser is just so unbelievably under the radar. You get many of the benefits of those cars without having to kind of shout out, hey, look at me, rich person. I don't need any of that. So, during this last couple of weeks when I was driving, I had someone ask me if the Land Cruiser was a rental car. I had someone ask me if it was a contractor's vehicle, like a work person's vehicle who's doing some work. It's just great. I love that. You just don't make assumptions about someone in a Toyota like you do with a G-Wagon or a Range Rover unless you know the Land Cruiser. And if you don't, I just love how subtle it is. But those are the things I really like about it. With that said, there are some drawbacks that have become very apparent to me now, having owned this Land Cruiser for a few months and driven it. The biggest drawback is this. I'm going to use the car in a place where I do a lot of off-roading, where I'm going to let it sit. It's going to be, I'm going to use those things that it offers, the capability and the reliability. But as a car in the city or in the suburbs, I truly don't understand it. I drove this car, this Land Cruiser, through Rhode Island and Connecticut, down through Washington, D.C., spent a week in Washington, D.C. with it. I was up in New York City with it for a few days for like a long weekend. And the whole time I was driving, I was thinking, I would so much rather have a Range Rover or a Mercedes GLS or a BMW X7 or one of the other large luxury SUVs for city and suburban driving. The Land Cruiser is good at a lot of stuff, but it's awful compared to those vehicles at just normal around town everyday driving. On the highway, it's lumbering, it's sort of body rolls, it's slow, it doesn't feel anywhere near as stable or as solid as those luxury German rivals, the European cars, Range Rover included. Turning when you're just driving around normal roads is vague. It feels like a pickup truck. It feels like the body-on-frame SUV than it is. It feels very truck-like and not very car-like, which are kind of two different things, but it's both. And the Range Rover and the GLS and the X7 just do that so well. They feel like big cars on the road. And the Land Cruiser just doesn't drive that well in most pavement situations. And it's also just not all that luxurious. I can't believe mine was $85,000 or $80,000 back in 2013, 10 years ago, given that the interior just isn't really all that nice. The materials are mostly relatively cheap plastic, equivalent to what's in the Toyota Tundra pickup truck. The seats aren't that great. They're not especially plush or comfortable or well-styled, beautiful leather. Now, again, I want to point out, for me, all of this stuff is great. I need those big, durable pickup truck buttons because of how I plan to use this thing. Coming in off the beach, out of the snow, I don't really care. But as I'm driving it, I'm sitting there thinking, like, why would somebody who's just doing school runs, around the suburbs and going to the grocery store want one of these? And you see them being used that way. There's people in my neighborhood who have brand new Land Cruisers who they don't lift them. It's never dirty. They're just taking their kids to school. You see them in Texas like this all the time. People in Texas buying these big Land Cruisers and they're driving their kids to soccer practice. And I just don't understand why someone would want to do that, because you're making a lot of compromises compared to rivals. You're not getting the nicest interior. You're not getting a great driving experience. And frankly, the technology is pretty behind too. I know mine is a 13 model, but Land Cruisers in general have always lagged behind BMW, Mercedes-Benz, Range Rover, all the big players in terms of tech, and even behind the Escalade. And so I don't really understand why you would want to get one of these unless you wanted to do the things that it does best, which is the longevity and the capability. I mean, it's not even like you're getting a great badge. Like the G-Wagon, the outgoing G-Wagon, the old one, was a bad car, but it looked cool as hell, and all the celebrities had one, so you put up with some of its stupid compromises in order to have a G-Wagon. But this thing, you spend it $85,000 and you make a bunch of compromises, and most people just think you're in a Highlander. It's not that special. So I guess what I'm saying is I love it for what I'm using it for, and I think if you want to use a Land Cruiser for the capability, the durability, yeah, that's what it's for. But I don't quite get why people buy it unless they plan to really use those primary selling points. The longevity, the subtlety. If you're just going to be picking up your kids from school, go get an X7. There's no need for one of these. And actually, most people do that. They go get an X7 or an Escalade, and I guess that's why Toyota is canceling the Land Cruiser here in the United States. There just aren't enough people who want a luxury, expensive SUV and want to focus on reliability, longevity. Most of the people who are spending $100,000 for an SUV, they want this hot new thing, and they lease one every few years and get the coolest and the best tech and that sort of thing. And the Land Cruiser just doesn't find that many buyers who actually want to use it for what it's intended for. So I guess that makes sense why why Land Cruisers have not remained very popular here in the United States. For me, for what I'm using it for a lot of enthusiasts, the Land Cruiser really does do a good job of kind of meeting its purpose. But for most people who want a luxury SUV at this price point, the Land Cruiser just isn't, it's not really there. But there you go. My first 4 months and a few thousand miles with my Land Cruiser. I've already crashed it, and also I'm not exactly sure why most people buy it. So we're not off to a great start. No, but really, I love the Land Cruiser. I love what it is. I love what it does. And I look forward to a long life with my Land Cruiser wasting away on the East Coast, doing its thing and providing me the reliability and longevity that I crave from this vehicle.